So, recently Ilia Tuporia just brutally knocked out Max Holloway, and I actually did predict that Ilia would finish him, but not by chinning him, because before the Tuporia fight, Holloway had never gotten knocked out. And the guy's only 27 years old, which makes it even crazier because the guy already has both Volk and Holloway by KO on his record. So I think it's time to ask ourselves the question, who can really beat this guy? And in this video, I've decided to answer that by breaking down some future potential matchups and also giving my prediction for each matchup. But that said, let's start off with the first potential opponent, and that is Diego Lopes. And this dude's been putting in work ever since he got into the UFC. I think he got into the UFC last year and he already has 5 wins. And currently he is coming off a dominant win against Brian Ortega, who is ranked number 3 at the time, so it should pretty much make him eligible for a title shot. And I actually think Lopes would have a decent chance against Tuporia as well. And the reason for that is because he's a very fast starter, and Tuporia isn't a slow starter, but he certainly grows into the fight. So in the beginning of the first round, he isn't as dangerous as he is in the second and the third, for example. And in contrast, Diego Lopes is a fighter that is the most dangerous in the first round, but then starts fading away the longer the fight goes on. And this actually works in Diego Lopes' favor in this fight, because he could potentially take out Tuporia in the first round before he has made any reads on Lopes. And that is his best chance. Cause skill for skill, I don't think Lopes is as good as Tuporia. Don't get me wrong, Lopes is a very dangerous striker, especially in the first round, but his main weapon is his boxing. And once he lands on you, he's just gonna keep going after you, and he's also very powerful for the division. He pretty much dropped Ortega with the first combination he landed, and unlike some other fighters with heavy hands, like Josh Emmett for example, he's also very technically sound. He throws a lot of combination and also has great counters and head movement. However, I think that most people can see that Tuporia is more skilled when it comes to striking. He probably has more power than Lopes, he's more technical with his boxing, he has better timing, he's more precise. And something a lot of people don't really talk about is how good he is at making reads on his opponents. And that's something Lopes hasn't really shown. And overall, I just think Tuporia is just a level above everyone else when it comes to the striking. Now, when it comes to the grappling though, I definitely think there's an argument for Lopes. He is a very dangerous submission artist, but the thing is that he doesn't shoot takedowns. He prefers to stand up, and if he knocks the guy down, he might use his grappling. So he doesn't try to bring the fight to the ground, and even if he tried to, Tuporia is a very good grappler himself, so I think they kind of cancel each other out in that department. Now, I'm gonna be honest here, I would go with Tuporia in this matchup, because I just think the likelihood of Lopes catching him and finishing him very early in the fight is relatively low. And that's because Tuporia's specialty is his boxing. He has good defense, and after 2 minutes, Tuporia's gonna have reads on him. And I think Lopes is truly cooked, because he fades away the longer the fight goes on, while Tuporia just gets better. And there's also the fact that he throws a lot of flurries that makes you very open for counters. So I can just see Lopes trying to start off a combo and Tuporia brutally countering him and knocking him out. But anyways, moving on to the next potential opponent, Alexander Volkanovski. And I know, most people including myself don't want to see this rematch right now, but it's looking like the UFC will be making this matchup next. Considering Volk walked into the octagon while Ilia had his octagon interview, but I don't think the rematch would be too different from their first fight, if I'm gonna be honest. Volk is 36 years old, so I don't see him being able to make any drastic changes in his game. And not to mention, the only thing we really have going into this rematch is his last fight, where he got brutally knocked out, which is why I don't like immediate rematches. If he had a fight in between, we could have at least known if he still had it or had improved a lot, even though it's pretty unlikely. And I just wonder how Volk is gonna beat him in the rematch. I think Tuporia is a better striker, he's more powerful, he has better technique, etc. The only thing he really has over Tuporia in the striking realm are the kicks and maybe speed. And the kicks could cause some trouble, especially the leg kicks, since Tuporia stands so leg heavy. But Tuporia was able to take them in the first fight, so I don't see how he wouldn't be able to in the second fight. So I probably see him getting knocked out again by Ilia, but I don't want to waste too much time on this breakdown, because no disrespect to Volk, he's a goated fighter and one of my favorite fighters of all time. But we already saw this fight once before, and I don't think he will improve too much considering he's 36. And we also haven't even seen if he has improved, because he hadn't had a fight since getting knocked out by Tuporia, and that's why I actually want him to fight someone like Lopes before getting a title shot. Now moving on to the next potential opponent, and that is Movsar Evloev, and this fight could take place if he manages to beat Aljamain Sterling, who's another guy we're gonna get into a minute, because even though Evloev is pretty inactive, he does have some decent wins on his record, like Ige, a Lopez win that has aged really well, a win against Allen too, so beating Sterling on top of that should make him very qualified for a title fight. And Evloev is a very well-rounded fighter. His specialty is of course the grappling, he has nice takedowns and very good ground control, but he isn't a bum when it comes to striking either. He's actually quite technical in that aspect. However, I just think he gets folded by Tuporia. Sorry to all the Dagestani hardcore fans out there, but he has zero finishing ability, man. Every one of his fights in the UFC has ended in a decision, and the guy barely attempts any submissions on the ground either. The guy's a classic positional grappler. He gets the takedown and then half guard camps, and it's not like he's causing major damage on the ground either. And I just think that style matches up bad against Tuporia. Tuporia's a very good grappler himself. He has a lot of submissions on his record, and I think he started out with Greco-Roman wrestling, so I just have a very hard time seeing Tuporia getting half guard camped. And that leaves the striking, and in terms of striking, they're not close. Like, Evloev was getting lit up by Allen on the feet, and Allen is a good striker, don't get me wrong, but imagine what Tuporia would do to Evloev on the feet. Evloev isn't a knockout artist. He has good technique, but that's about it. He's very basic when it comes to striking, and I think that if you're gonna have somewhat of a chance against Tuporia on the feet, you can't be too basic. Like, the reason I think Lopez has a chance is because he's very explosive in the first round, so he could potentially catch Tuporia. Evloev doesn't have anything like that. But that said, let's stop for a second and say that Evloev manages to half guard camp Tuporia. There are still going to be moments in the stand-up where Tuporia is going to have the opportunity to either knock out Evloev or cause more significant damage and win the rounds. So I would easily favor Tuporia in this matchup. Now moving on to the guy I mentioned earlier, Aljamain Sterling, and this guy is also a positional grappler like Evloev, but he actually has submission ability, and he also doesn't half guard camp, he just camps on the back instead. And I actually don't think this fight would be too different from the Evloev fight, because even though Sterling is a very good grappler, Tuporia is also a solid grappler himself, and I think the Jan fights are extra relevant to look back on here. Because Jan and Tuporia do have some similarities, like they're both good and powerful boxers, and they both have pretty good grappling as well, although I think Tuporia is a better and more powerful boxer, and is arguably a better grappler. And Sterling had a lot of problems with Jan, like Jan was absolutely beating the brakes off him in the first fight, and the second fight was extremely close. And as I mentioned earlier, I think Tuporia is a lot more dangerous on the feet than what Jan is. I think he's more skilled and more powerful. Jan basically dismantled Sterling in the later rounds with a stand-up, so imagine what Tuporia would do to him. I mean, the guy knocked out Volk and Max Holloway, for God's sake. So what's gonna stop him from knocking out Sterling? You can maybe argue that he could submit Tuporia since he is a little bit different from Evloev. He actually does try to get to the back of his opponents, but then again, Tuporia has a wrestling background and a grappling background himself, so will Sterling even be able to take him down? Personally, I think Sterling would have a hard time getting this fight to the ground, but I think he would get a takedown here and there, but Tuporia would get up pretty quickly, and on the feet, I think Sterling gets absolutely smoked. You also can't forget that while Tuporia grows into the fight, Sterling fades away, he gasses out, and honestly, in this fight, I see Tuporia absolutely sleeping Sterling, because Sterling makes a lot of errors on the feet, which makes him very open for counters. For example, he oversteps when he throws his hands, and kinda leads with his head, which of course caused the famous O'Malley knockout, and I definitely think Tuporia will be able to make reads on Sterling and slump him, if O'Malley was able to. Now, his next opponent might be a little bit surprising, but it's Yair Rodriguez, and to be fair, the chance of this fight happening is quite low considering he's on a 2-fight losing streak, but I included him in this video because I think he has a stylistical chance against Tuporia. Yair has really good kicks. I would easily say that he's the best kicker at featherweight. They're very fast and very powerful, and as I mentioned before, Tuporia stands very lead leg heavy, which makes him very open for leg kicks, and Yair was absolutely chewing up the legs of Holloway in their fight, who's another guy who stands very lead leg heavy, so I could definitely see Yair taking advantage of that in this fight. Not to mention that Tuporia sometimes dips his head down, and that does kind of put him in a position where he's very susceptible for a head kick or a knee up the middle. And Tuporia's been wobbled before by a head kick from Jai Herbert, And Herbert is a good striker, but I would definitely say that Yair has a better kicks than him. Not to mention the fact that Yair is also a very wild guy. He throws a lot of head kicks, flying knees, sneaky elbows, and stuff like that. So there is a chance that he does catch Tuporia with something, especially in the first round where Tuporia is kind of feeling things out. However, I do only feel like he will have this chance in the first round, because after that, Tuporia is probably gonna have him figured out. And Yair also becomes more tired and gasses out after the first round, while Tuporia only grows into the fight. But we can't talk about this matchup without mentioning the fact that Yair also has a major problem with his boxing. Like both offensively and defensively. Like the guy can throw punches, he's very fast and explosive, but when he throws them with pretty bad technique, and he also drops his guard when throwing his punches. Speaking about his guard, the guy basically has his hands by his chest and he also barely moves his head, which is a recipe for getting hit a lot, and we see this a lot in his fights where he can just be standing there and take clean shots to the shin without any setups from his opponent. And he also has his shin quite high up when he's striking, and I'm gonna be honest, he's just asking for Tuporia to chin him in this fight. Like, Yair's biggest weakness is Tuporia's biggest strength, and you could say the same for Yair. Like, Yair's biggest strength is Tuporia's biggest weakness. However, Yair has more of a problem with boxing than what Tuporia has with kicks, and the chances of Yair knocking out Tuporia with a flying knee or a head kick in the first round is lower than Tuporia surviving the first, and chinning him in the second, or straight up finishing him in the first. And you also can't forget that Tuporia can just resort back to his grappling if he needs to, because Holloway basically beat Yair by mixing in his grappling, and I think Tuporia is a better grappler by a pretty good margin. So if you're picking Yair in this fight, you're basically picking him because you think he knocks him out with something crazy like a head kick or a flying knee or something like that, which I could see happening, but Tuporia is so good at closing that distance and getting into boxing range, and I just see Yair getting into boxing exchanges with Tuporia and getting his jaw absolutely spun. And if the fight goes past the first round, Yair is pretty much cooked if we're being real, so it goes without saying that I will be picking Tuporia in this matchup. But there is one more opponent on this list, and it's probably the one all of you have been waiting for, and that's Islam Makhachev. And this would be an absolute super fight. Both of them have accomplished a lot in their divisions, and Tuporia's actually been going after Makhachev a little bit. I think he said something about how he didn't want to fight Makhachev in a street fight because he didn't want to pay for his medical bills. And all of the Dagestanis got really pissed off. But anyways, I would want this fight to take place probably after Tuporia has defended one more time against like the winner of Volk versus Lopez, if they fight. And the fight would of course take place at lightweight, and this is actually a pretty hard fight to predict in my opinion, because both of them are very well-rounded fighters. Like, they're both good grapplers. Of course, Makhachev is significantly better in that department, but when it comes to striking, it's a little complicated, because they're both incredibly good strikers, but they're very different. Makhachev is a southpaw who's very big for the division and therefore stays at range and uses a lot of kicks, but he does have hands too, as he showed in the Poirier fight. Tuporia, on the other hand, is more specialized in boxing. He kind of switches between a Philly shell and a high guard, and likes to fight in mid-range to close range, and he doesn't really throw kicks besides calf kicks. So who do I think will win between them in the striking? Well, as I said before, it's tricky, but I would probably lean more towards Tuporia, and people might reference back to the Poirier fight where Makhachev did very well with his boxing against a boxer. And Poirier is definitely one of the best, if not the best, boxer at lightweight. But in my opinion, Tuporia is a lot better. First of all, I think he has faster hands than Poirier because he's built smaller and is therefore able to transfer his weight around and rotate his body faster. Then he arguably has a lot more power than Poirier because he was the first guy to sleep Holloway, which is something Poirier wasn't able to do. And I think that overall he just seems to have better precision and timing than Poirier has. And Poirier was actually kind of working Makhachev on the feet too. Like, don't get me wrong, Makhachev did very well on the feet, but Poirier landed some clean shots that hurt Makhachev in that fight. And you also have to look back on the first Volk fight, where Volk kind of put a whooping on Makhachev and even knocked him down, and Tuporia is definitely a better striker than Volk, even though Volk is a really good striker himself. So if Poirier and Volk were able to perform like that, what's stopping Tuporia from being able to do better than those two? But that said, I do think Makhachev can perform well against Tuporia on the feet, if he keeps his distance and uses a lot of kicks, especially leg kicks, because again, Tuporia stands very lead leg heavy, and that does make it harder to defend leg kicks. kicks, and Makhachev could also set up a head kick with leg kicks like he did against Volk, and potentially even knock Tuporia out with that. And Makhachev is also going to want to use his clinch a lot in this fight, because an age-old strategy when facing someone who's shorter is to clinch them up whenever they enter into close range. There is one issue though, and that's Makhachev using the tie clinch a lot. While the tie clinch isn't bad, because you basically have complete control over the head and a lot of strike options, you have no control over the arms of your opponent, and we saw this in the Poirier fight where Makhachev had Poirier in the tie clinch and Poirier was just unloading hard body shots on Makhachev. So it is quite the double-edged sword for Makhachev, especially against someone like Tuporia. Now, we also can't talk about this fight without discussing the grappling, because the best way to neutralize a dangerous striker is by taking him down. And the difference between Tuporia, Volk, and Poirier is that Volk and Poirier has had their takedown defense tested against top tier grapplers. While we can't really say the same for Tuporia, the best showcasing of his takedown defense was against Bryce Mitchell, who is a very good grappler, where he defended a lot of takedowns, and if he got taken down, he would just get back up. But the problem is that Mitchell isn't close to Makhachev's level, and therefore it's kinda hard to predict how well he will defend against takedowns. But I will say that he does have some things going for him in that department. The first one is that he is significantly shorter than Makhachev, which makes it harder for Makhachev to get to Tuporia's legs, and the other one is that he has a Greco-Roman wrestling background and a black belt in BJJ, so he's not a slouch when it comes to grappling. But that said, I think this is one of the hardest fights to predict right now because they're both so incredibly good. And it's just hard seeing Makhachev losing, but I do think Tuporia has a better chance than most lightweights right now. And I think this fight really comes down to how well Tuporia defends the takedowns. Because honestly, I can just really see Tuporia shinning Makhachev in the stand-up. Tuporia hits harder than Volk and Poirier. He's also more precise with his punches. So if Makhachev's getting dropped by Volk, I could definitely see him getting dropped by Tuporia. But if Makhachev is able to take Tuporia to the ground and keep it there, he could submit Tuporia or do enough damage to take home the rounds. But I think a big problem for Makhachev is that he has fell in love with his striking. So when he doesn't get the takedowns, he just resorts back to his striking. And sometimes he does get very sloppy with his striking due to him gassing out from the weight cut. And if he gets sloppy, I could definitely see Tuporia closing that distance and putting him down with a vicious combination. But then again, Tuporia's never been tested against a good grappler, so the safer option might be Makhachev, because if you're picking Tuporia, you are kind of making a guess that he will defend the takedowns and survive on the ground and be able to get back up. So I know a lot of people might get pissed off at this, especially all the Makhachev fans, but I just have a feeling that Tuporia will be able to survive on the ground against Makhachev, and he will also get a lot of opportunities to put him away on the feet. So I will actually go with Tuporia here, although I do think this fight is more of a 50-50 situation, so Makhachev is definitely not a bad pick. I would honestly say he's a more safe pick, but sometimes you have to risk it for the biscuit. But anyways, to summarize this long video, the fighter who is the most likely to beat Tuporia is Makhachev, and the two people that have a decent chance against him at featherweight is Lopez and Yair. However, I would probably favor Tuporia in all of those matchups. But anyways, a little off topic here at the end, but I have been pretty inactive on YouTube recently, and that's because I've had a lot of work, which takes up a lot of my day, so I haven't really been able to prioritize making YouTube videos. So I would really appreciate it if you subscribed and liked this video, because it would help out the channel a lot. And I'll be honest, if I start seeing some potential in this, I'll quit my job and put all my energy into this, because I love MMA and I love discussing the sport with other people who love MMA. But sorry for the yapping session there at the end. Subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Who do you think beats Ilia Tuporia? Am I just a grade A Tuporia glacier, or was I spitting facts? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and also share this to a real Tuporia hater. And I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.